Guys,
Hello.
I'm sorry I'm late.
Oh, we're a minute early. We're 2 minutes early. Take your time.
It's nice to see you guys. How are you?
We're good. No,
We're
we're early.
fine.
We can actually go. I can go get a cup of coffee while you're getting
Totally
ready.
up to you. I'm ready. We, we're trying to train our 2.5-year-old to sleep in her own bed, which has made bedtime like a long process, but we're good. We're ready now.
Okay. Okay. Well, she's in a bed, not a crib, right? So she's in and out. Yeah.
It's her crib, but we took the fourth wall down because she was close to catapulting herself out. So
Yep.
Yeah. That's what they do.
yeah.
How was the week? Fine. Good.
Things are good.
Yeah. I feel like it was kind of nice to have an uneventful. You know.
That's true. That is true.
Did you do anything for Tu B'Shvat yesterday or today?
No.
I won't tell anyone.
I think I sang the Tu B'Shvat song in show yesterday.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I think a lot of Tu B'Shvat songs. No, I thought it's Tu B'Shvat. Yeah.
That comes at the end.
Oh, that's the same song?
Yeah.
There's just one Tu B'Shvat song.
Yeah, we sang that the whole way to school in the car. When you have little kids, it's like impossible not to celebrate Tu B'Shvat.
Right. No, what we talked about is that when we were kids and went to Hebrew school, they gave us carob to eat and told us that was the Tu B'Shvat treat. And it really is
gross.
not so good.
It's horrible.
Yeah, we once bought carob chocolate chips, like carob chips instead of
They're
chocolate
not as good.
Yeah.
And carob chips that have sugar. So carob chips are sweetened.
Yeah,
Carob,
very good.
carob just from
There was a time when people were trying to say carob is the new chocolate, and
that was like the 1970s. People were trying to be crunchy and healthy. So
yeah,
we're dating ourselves.
I do remember those long carob pods that they would have you try.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They still do. I don't know if you did this, but like dipping a cotton ball in pink paint and like making little cherry blossoms on a tree.
Oh, that's cute.
Never did that.
A classic of the 1990s, and
that's
my
very
children
cute.
are doing it again today. So
okay, our kids must have done that.
I don't remember cherry blossoms. Oh well. And any scones this week? What are we baking this week?
You know, he's very lazy. He's doing nothing.
Wait, there was something we were going to follow up with, and I totally forgot.
About baking?
Oh, no, I was going to tell you. You did well on your video. That was 2 weeks ago.
Oh, thank you. It is much more difficult than anything I think I've done.
I hate it. I really hate it.
Not you. She hates it when she does it.
I hate talking on video.
You know what? I wrote something down and then I was like very wed to what I wrote. And so I should have written nothing but like a few notes, because then you just saw me looking at my paper.
Yeah.
And I tried like taping the paper to the podium above where I, but nothing made it look like I was looking at the camera. So,
well, you know what I learned? I learned I could turn my camera, I could do it on my computer for Zoom. I did a meeting and I made my camera, whatever. I made the picture small so I could read my screen, and it looked like I was talking to everybody.
Oh, interesting. That did not work for me. I'll have to try it again if I do it again. But thank you for the feedback.
I think I'd have to ask everybody how it looked, but
yes, it was hard to be able to see and review. Yeah.
But
that was terrible.
I wanted to tell you it was good, so you did many takes and it looked fine.
Thank you. Yes. I spent like 45 minutes on it. I thought I would do it in 5 minutes and be done. I moved around to my house. I found better lighting.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like when you used to hear like a voicemail from yourself. Like your voice doesn't really sound the same, I think, in a recording.
Yeah.
Then I tried to like lower my voice and stop with that like girly like up at the end of the sentence, and I did it again. Yeah. Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Talking about the anxieties of having to record yourself in this era. When you give a Dvar Torah at Shul, like you'll never know what you looked like. So kind of nice. Welcome. So I thought that today we would talk about one of my favorite ideas in the world, not just in Judaism, which is the idea of liminal moments or space in time. Because I think we're about to embark on what is going to be a very long liminal moment in our history. And so I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if I can make this work. Oh, I'm going to have to hold on. And I put the definition here because I didn't think I would be able to describe it as well as we could here. And then we could sort of brainstorm a little bit about what kind of liminal moments there are for us. So the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines liminal as of, relating to, or situated at a sensory threshold, barely perceptible of, or capable of eliciting a response, or of, relating to, or being an intermediate state, phase, or condition, in between, transitional, and then the example is in the liminal state between life and death. Just sort of a sad one, I guess. Right, so an example of a liminal space might be like your mezuzah, right? Outside your home is like the public domain. Halachically, it's the public space sort of emotionally. Inside your home is the private space or private domain. What's another example? Like an experience might be lighting candles, right? When you light your Shabbat candles, you're accepting that liminal moment in between chol, like all of the weekday stuff that you do, and the holy restfulness of Shabbat. Havdalah on the other end, right? Of sort of marking that moment of leaving that space. And these moments are very significant, I think. Even when they're not big or complicated. And that we often miss their significance in like the whirlwinds of our life. And so in Judaism, we've gotten very good, I think, at marking those liminal spaces. So I would say on a grander scale, right, like bris, bar, bat mitzvah, upshurin, if you do that with your kids, right? Those are all moments where it's not as neat as like putting down your iPhone and picking up your Shabbat Sidur, but you're trying to say, you know, my child is passing through a phase, or I am passing through a phase, right? Where I go from being a unnamed baby to a named baby, or a total child to someone who's ready to think about accepting mitzvot, right? And upshurin is maybe marking that leaving toddlerhood and entering into like little childness, and that those moments are important sometimes because they're so messy or hard to pin down. It's not like Shabbos times where you can say what the liminal moment is on your clock. I don't know if anyone else has a liminal moment they want to share. There are many of them. Cool. If you think of any, feel free to shout them out. And anthropologists note actually that the liminal space is really about a quality of what they call ambiguity or disorientation. And it occurs in the middle stage of a ritual when participants have not yet begun the transition to the status that they'll hold when that ritual is complete at the end. And when change happens slowly and continuously, the hope is that that process will be honored instead of feared. And I think that it's comforting to many. I think it's why I don't really like change. And so I like the liminal moment where we can like mark that it's happening, and it might be scary, but we're gonna lean into it. And so at the beginning of this week's parsha, I think we see that beginning of that liminal space. And so just before we jump in, Rabbi Sachs, in a totally, at the end of our liminal moment in Bamidbar, talks a little bit more about like I think this like national process that we go through. And he quotes a very famous sociologist, anthropologist, who talks about in his book, The Rites of Passage, that societies develop these rituals to mark the transition from one state to the next, from childhood to adulthood, from being single to being married. And they involve 3 stages, right? So we're gonna think about these 3 stages in terms of our parsha this week. The first is separation, a symbolic break with the past. The third is incorporation, re-entering society with a new identity. So maybe Matan Torah, maybe entering the state of Israel, right? It's sort of unclear what that third identity is going to be. The first, the separation, I think we're going to see right now. And between the two is the crucial stage of transition when, having said goodbye to who you were, but not yet hello to who you are about to become, you are recast, reborn, and refashioned. Yeah, so I think this is like a really powerful moment, and we feel it and we express it in so many ways when we talk about Yetziat Mitzrayim, when we talk about the like power of the sea parting, or there's a midrash, right, of two men from Israel who wade into the water waiting for it to part. I don't know if you're familiar, but like, right, they go into their knees and nothing happens. They look back at Moshe, and they go into their waists. They look back at Moshe and nothing happens. They go into their shoulders, and it's not until they sort of take that step from saying goodbye to who they were to hello to who they will ultimately become that the waters part. Like, that leap of faith was necessary, right? Or we talk about singing, the joy of singing at the other end. And that first break is good. It's almost an easy part. And it's the middle part that is going to be long and hard, as we know, 40 years hard at this point. So let's read the first two psukim here of our parsha, and then think about how the liminality is being expressed here. So, V'yehi b'shalach paro et ha'am, v'lo nachan Elokim derech eretz plishtim, ki karov hu, ki amar Elokim, pen yenachem ha'am birotam milchama v'shavu mitzrayma. Right, so when Paro let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Plishtim, although it was nearer, right, ki karovu, because God said they might have a change of heart when they see the war and return to Egypt. Vayasev Elokim et ha'am derech hamidbar Yam Suf v'chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. And so God led the people the roundabout way, by way of the wilderness of the Sea of Reeds, and the Israelites went up armed out of the land of Egypt. Right, and so in this very first pasuk, we hit phase one, the break. We are now free. Paro let the people go. And without knowing about liminal moments, we might assume like, that's it, they're free, right? They're going to sing on the other side. They're going to go into the desert. They're going to get ready to go into Israel. But it does not seem that simple, because in that very same pasuk, right, like not even a breath, a comma's worth of breath, right? We learn that God has already led them in another direction. And that the reason that he does that is because they might want to change their mind and go back to Egypt, which feels like this crazy thing. Go back to Egypt, right? They just spent 240 years crying about slavery in Egypt, and they just saw all the fearsome plagues that happened in Egypt, and all of a sudden they want to go back, or they might want to go back. Why would they want to go back? And so as we see throughout Bnei Israel's time in the Midbar, as we'll see like over the coming weeks and months even, Bnei Israel often want to go back, right? The fish is better in Egypt, any new obstacle, and they revert radically to their enslaved mindset. And so I think we see that right, the transition from slavery to freedom is long, and it's a long moment of liminality, of ambiguity, and of reorientation. So far, so good? Excellent. Okay.
Would you compare that to making aliyah and making yerida, like going up and then coming down?
I do think that like organizations like Nefesh B'Nefesh are about respecting the liminal space, right? Helping to ease the transition, because it can be hard, not just to get all the right documents and cards, because like obviously the bureaucracy is hard, but learning the language and learning where things are and like the right things to do and what's culturally appropriate. I do think that there is like a little bit of that there. I think that's a good example of liminality, when you move to a new place and you have to learn the culture and norms and language. Yeah, I like that. So many of the commentaries pick up on this idea that God takes them the long way, right? Not the short way. And part of that, and they rush to sort of figure out why. So we're going to look at Rabbeinu Hananel first. I only brought the English translated by Sefaria here. And he explains that God led them through the desert for a different reason. apart from the fact that the route through the lands of the Plishtim was the most convenient one. Because had he led them in that direction, God could not have performed even a fraction of the miracles he had in mind to perform in order to strengthen the people's confidence in him. Right, so here, what I hear Rabbeinu Hananel saying is, Bnei Israel their relationship with God was not fully formed. They'd gone on like a few dates, but they weren't really ready to like get engaged. But here they are. And so God doesn't want to rush that process of like getting to know each other. And so God leads them this long way so that God can give them the man, he can give them the Be'er Miriam to give them water, right? All of the different good things. And I would say, I mean, Rabbeinu Hananel is a very traditional commentary, and perhaps also it gives them a chance, sort of like what we spoke about a little bit last week, it gives them a chance to make mistakes, right? Bnei Israel is able to complain. They're able to sort of get that, like, to exercise the Egypt that is in their memory through the way in the desert. And so I think that like in today's language, Rabbeinu Hananel would say this liminal moment is hard, and God is honoring it by giving Bnei Israel a chance to get ready, right? The phase 3, they're not ready for phase 3. They need more miracles. They need more confidence in God. They need more maybe like love of God to say Na'aseh v'nishma at the end of their time in the Midbar. And on some level, I think that this is really surprising, right? They just saw the like shock and awe of the 10 plagues in Egypt, and they're about to see the Kriyat Yam Suf. Like, how many miracles does a people need to feel close to God, right? We don't see miracles at all. And I think many of us work on finding our ways to be close to God. But I think that Rabbeinu Hananel is really recognizing the impact that slavery, that decades and years and generations of slavery has on a people, and that they're in a really shaky place. And so this gives them a little more time. On a slightly more psychological level, to no surprise, the Rambam has a slightly different take, because many psychologists really do believe that liminality is terrifying, but it allows a transformation. Right, so I think Rabbeinu Hananel is like more focused on dependent Bnei Israel, getting more comfortable in the dependence on God. And the Rambam, I think, is thinking about the transformation, that to have this transformation, you need to let go of phase 1 to enter phase 3, right? You need to let go of what was to be in like this new free space as free people. And so the Rambam explains, he here is talking about korbanot. The Rambam has this idea in the Guide to the Perplexed, the Moreh Nevuchim, that korbanot were a minal phase. They were the liminal moment for Bnei Israel, and that tefillah, that like verbal worship of God, was the ideal that they were working towards. Right, and that ultimately God could have created a man that was ready to use tefillah to be close to God, but God chose to allow people to experience that process, to go through that transformation. And the Rambam uses our pasuk as the foundation for that belief. Right, so he says here God led the people about, right? He's quoting the pasuk, away from the direct road, which he originally intended, because he feared that they may meet on that way with hardships too great for their ordinary strength. He took them by another road in order to obtain thereby his original object. In the same manner that God refrained from prescribing what the people by their natural disposition would be incapable of obeying, and gave the above-mentioned commandments as a means of securing his chief object, to spread a knowledge of him among the people, and to cause them to reject idolatry. It is contrary to man's nature that he should suddenly abandon all the different kinds of divine service and the different customs in which he had been brought up and which have been so general that they were considered as a matter of course. It would be just as if a person trained to work as a slave with mortar and bricks or similar things should interrupt his work, clean his hands, and at once fight with real giants. It was the result of God's wisdom that the Israelites were led about in the wilderness until they acquired courage. And gvura might be translated as strength more accurately, but I think the Sefaria translation is beautiful, right? To say, what did Bnei Israel lack? They obviously had some emunah in Hashem. They were willing to step into Kriyat Yam Suf. They were willing to leave Egypt. But to have the courage to be their own people, to be Bnei Israel, to go into the lands of Israel, they didn't have the courage. And I think that the Rambam understanding, right, that you can't just like clean off your hands and go from being a slave to being a free person. And that there's like a real process that has to take place there for them to gain not only confidence in God, as Rabbeinu Hananel says, but to gain confidence in themselves and in their own process of creating themselves. So I think that there's no greater example of the beauty of the long short path, or the short long path, than this story in Eruvin on Daf Nun Gimel Amud Bet 53b. This Rabbi Rabbeinu Hananya, Rabbi Yoshua ben Chanina, is traveling, and he comes to a crossroads. Right, he's speaking here. Right, Pam hachat hayiti mahalech b'derech. I was traveling, v'ra'iti tinok, like a young boy, yoshev al parshat derechim. He was sitting at the fork in the road, and so v'amarti lo, I said to him, be'eza derech nelech la'ir. Right, what's the fastest way for me to get to the city? What's the way? Not derech, not like in the reeds, but derech haplishtim. What's the fastest way? Amarli, and he said to me, zo k'tzara v'aruka, zo aruka v'k'tzara. Right. And so rather ambiguously or cryptically, the young boy says, oh, well, this is the short and long path, and that path is the long and short path. And so Rabbi Yoshua ben Chanina has to sort of figure out which way to go. So he says, oh, well, I'll go the short way, right? As I think many people normally and naturally would want to do. And so he goes that way. Right. He sort of, so he like walks the 3 blocks, right? But then he finds that the angle at which he's approached the city, there are all these gardens and orchards surrounding it. And he can't go through them to get into the city. Almost like the guy said, right, there's the short and long path because you're going to get to a gate, but that gate is locked, and then you're going to have to walk all the way around the city to the other side. So he goes back. Rabbi Yoshua ben Chanina is not happy. Chazarti la'acharai, amarti lo, b'ni, halo amarta li k'tzara. Didn't you tell me that way was the short way? He's like, come on. Like, I did all this walking for nothing. Amarli, v'lo amarti lach aruka. Right. And didn't I also tell you that it was long? Right. The boy is brave in rebuking his teacher and saying, like, you didn't listen to the whole story. And so then Rabbi Yoshua ben Chanina is a very forgiving man. And Neshaktiv al Rosho, he kisses him on the head, like he praises him. Va'amarti lo, and he says to him, Ashrichem Yisrael shekulam chachamim gedolim atem migdolechem va'ad ktanechem. Right, basically, wow, like you're so smart. I didn't realize God made everyone so smart, the old and the young amongst us. And I think that what Rabbi Yoshua ben Chanina realizes is that right, we are often impatient. We want to go the short way, but the short way is often the short but long way. And if we can honor the process, then we can go the long but short way, and it will feel shorter, or it will be more rewarding when we get there, because the liminal space that is not the mezuzah or lighting our Shabbat candles is messy and is long. And right, a bar mitzvah is not just, I shouldn't even say I don't know, thank God yet, but a bar mitzvah is not just the year leading up where you teach your child to lean, and it's not just the day where you call him up to the Torah or the party the day after, right? It's a really long process of pulling your kid out of bed to go to shul, or encouraging him to find his love of davening, or whatever the thing is, or how we frame it, right? It's embarking on a lifelong liminal moment in a lot of ways. And often that can be uncomfortable. And so I think that God knew this, right? He knew this especially about us as a nation of slaves. And so even though Derech Plishim was nearer, it was almost like the nearer long way. Had we gone that way, perhaps we would have made more mistakes that would have taken us even longer to get into Israel. And so instead, God gave us the space to grow and accept our new state and new stature in life. With free will. I've talked a lot. Does anyone else want to say anything? Okay, excellent. So for me, as a one who is fearful of change and a lover of liminal space, what I really liked is that even after seeing this all-powerful show from God, God is honoring the fact that change and growth is not easy, and God is giving Bnei Israel the space to do that, to grow and to honor the liminal moment. And so I encourage everyone to find those liminal spaces for themselves, because I think that they're really important. And some of them are really nicely baked into Judaism, like as we come up onto Shabbat. And some of them are about finding your own tefillot to say, or yoga to do, or walks to take, whatever it is, but that the ritual of the liminal moment can be very powerful. And we learn about it in this week's prayer.
I think it's interesting that the first commandment given is blessing the new moon, which is exactly a liminal moment when you go from shrinking to growing. That's almost the nature, that's like the quintessential example in nature of that sort of moment. And we still bless it every month, right? The Molad. And I think maybe that's a sign that it may seem scary when the moon is completely gone for just that moment, but don't worry, it's coming back.
That's beautiful. I love that.
This
That's really nice.
Makes a virtue of being obscure. I don't get why do you think this is a positive story? It strikes me as perverse.
The Eruvin story.
Pardon?
The story in Eruvin, or the idea that God takes the
story itself. It's rather than explain something clearly, deliberately mislead. By implication, why that should be a happy ending is beyond me.
Yes, I definitely hear that. I think that, right, it would have been nice had the boy said to him, I think you need to take the longer path. It looks like, right, when you get to this place where you could turn left or go straight, it looks like you'll want to go straight, but really you need to turn left. That would have been a much more respectful, direct way of talking to Rabbi Yehoshua ben Chanina, to helping him, and why he gave him this like weird clue instead of just telling him the answer is curious. But I think that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Chanina, the reason he is grateful to the boy is that the boy reminded him of this principle, right? It's almost as though Rabbi Yehoshua ben Chanina is saying, I should have known to take the long, short path, not the short, long path.
The question is, why should he have known? He asks a simple question and gets a devious answer. It's beyond my, mind you, I think this is a literary style, and it's not to be taken as actual advice or anything. So,
yes, it comes in a long chain of stories where the rabbis learn from young children, which is interesting in and of itself. And why the children can't be direct, I don't know. But I think you're right. But I think, and maybe part of the answer is that sometimes it's really hard to learn something without doing it. And so had the boy just told him, he might have not gotten to the same place, whereas walking the short path, seeing how it got him further away, helped him understand this principle in a different way. But yes, it is an odd literary style to our sensibilities. Did you want to say something, Barry? I think I saw you go off mute. Nope.
Yeah, I think if we go back to the original Parsha, we were slaves. We didn't have the ability to be warriors. It took 2 generations to get rid of the slave mentality to become warriors, because they weren't going to give us the land without it. We came out with arms, it says, but we didn't have the kechas to go to war, which is a difficult thing to do. So it took 2 generations or 40 years for us to get the warrior mentality to go in and take the land, to get rid of the slave mentality that had been embedded with us for over 200 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that respecting that phase, right, of knowing that it's not as simple as, right, especially today, like we talk about emerging adulthood. I don't know how many of you have emerging adults in your life, right? But we say now that age 24 to, I think it's like 36, some really long period in your life is called emerging adulthood. No longer does someone graduate from high school or college and become an adult. It's like a long process, right, to shed your teenage self. And I don't know, there are probably many liminal moments when your parents stop paying your rent or your phone bill, when you get your first real job, when you buy a house, who knows what those things are, right? But there are lots of really like messy liminal spaces. And I think, Barry, that you're right, that the Mefarshim are recognizing that God was honoring that stage. God wasn't trying to rush Bnei Israel through the experience of casting away their slave mentality and moving into their warrior mentality, 100%.
Another formulation of the same thing I heard, I can't tell you the source, but it's easier to take the people out of Egypt than take Egypt out of the people.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's true, right? We say that sort of tongue in cheek these days about, you can take the girl out of New York, but you can't take the New York out of the girl, right? Right. Things become deeply ingrained in us, and to shift the way that we think about things or the way that we act is really hard. The physical moving is much easier than the emotional or the spiritual or the intellectual moving. And I guess maybe the long short way is saying sometimes you need geographic space to get to that new place. It's not enough to just, leave somewhere and go somewhere new. Although today, of course, journeys take a very small amount of time, right? But back, before airplanes and trains and cars, you did have that physical space to transition from one place to another. And I think that is to your original point, Nelson. That's like why there are places like Nefesh B'Nefesh to help accommodate those transitions. I think that idea about the new moon is very smart, Dan, because it is such a odd question as to why that's the first mitzvah, right? We didn't look at that last week, but there are many different ideas. But thinking about it as the like natural embodiment of a liminal moment in time, one that we'll keep repeating, because of course, when we get in the land, it's not as though we're a perfect people, right? Is a really, I think, a powerful model for how we should act.
Well, I think Shabbat comes along the same lines as the phases of the moon. You go a whole cycle of work, then you stop to rest and contemplate the work of creation, and then it starts all over again. Mm-hmm. So just like the new moon, I don't know if it is a mitzvah to observe Shabbat, but it's a commandment.
Right.
Why did Dan say that it's the first mitzvah, the new moon? Where does that come from, Dan?
Well, that's just it. That was the first mitzvah that was given to the Jews, HaChodesh Hazeh.
Right, in last week's Parsha, when they're getting ready to go, the first like actual commandment that God gives them, that's not sort of like do this or get ready to go this way, one that's sort of everlasting, it happens to be counting the months.
Okay.
And it does trouble the commentaries to sort of figure out why that of all the commandments, because like you're saying, Shabbat comes every week, maybe that's a better one, right? Maybe to only honor one God, because God is like, if we're saying monotheism is the hallmark of Jewish faith, but yet it is counting the new moon. And counting time for yourself. Maybe that's also a piece. I love the imagery of the moon waxing and waning, but maybe even just the idea that we have to count time for ourselves is that first step in going from total slaves, which have no control over their, right, no agency over their time, to a nation which has total control over their time, which has to add leap months and keep things in cycle on their own, is probably a piece of that transition also. Excellent.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you very much.
A good Shabbat, some easy, peaceful, transitionary liminal moments in and out of Shabbat and other things. And I'll see you all next week.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.